I'd like to demonstrate a few types of basic guards. I'll start with an A-frame, one of the most defensive guards. It's called an A-frame because the idea is to make a triangle point upwards towards my head. Or imagine a pyramid where the apex is your head. The defense descends down from your head, angling out at either side. This guard is advantageous when you need to pull your gear back in order to block far-reaching shots either to your inside hip or shoulder, or far-reaching shots around your outside shoulder, outside hip. It's especially pertinent against flails or other fighters that have a lot of reach on you. So the idea is pulling my guard up and back with my gear slanting in towards my head. You'll notice I'm more exposed in the center of my torso to incoming stabs. That's not how I would approach a spear. This is how I would deal with fighters swinging wide angled shots around the outside or inside of my guard or a flail. So the idea is pulling my gear up and back, making a point at my head. The next guard is what's commonly referred to as a denial guard. It is denying your opponent the opportunities to easily see and strike at your torso. This is holding your weapon guard, as we discussed before, with some arc between shoulder and weapon tip, and shield in front. This can have either my weapon foot forward, which is more aggressive or offensive as my weapon is closer to striking my opponent, or weapon foot back. In both of these situations, it's important to note that my weapon has some angle to it, and it's held right along my inside edge of my shield. I do not want to drift my arm out unless I do so intentionally to lure or bait an opponent. I want the inside of my body covered with the wall of my weapon. I want the outside of my body covered with the wall of my shield. And it's held casually in front of my body, denying my opponent the opportunity to see or strike at my torso. Finally, we have a ranging guard. The more I want to keep opponents at range, which is especially helpful if I'm fighting multiple enemies at the same time, I may lift my guard up and out and point my weapon tip actually directly around their face or chin region. So my guard lifts slightly and comes up and out from my body slightly, and that's to give the illusion to my enemy that my target area is actually out in front of me where my guard is. The idea is I want them to swing into my guard rather than my body. If they swing at maximum range, I can actually pull my guard slightly back such that they'll be striking at a target that's not there. Finally, I'd like to address weapon blocking. The key thing about blocking is don't do it when you don't have to. If you can dodge something rather than block it, that's the more efficient and less risky way to do it. You'll get more and more need for blocking and good, tight, fast weapon blocking the closer you are to your opponent. So to start out, I'd like to refer back to that initial box concept I talked about with the torso. We have a rectangular box that composes our torso, and thus we can think of our body in quadrants, split up and down and horizontal. To block each of these quadrants, we want to essentially throw a short jab with our hand on the weapon, aiming to receive our enemy's weapon just a few inches above or below where our hand is gripping our equipment. To block my outside hip, I want to throw a jab that goes firmly across my body and covers just over my hip bone or waistline. Notice I'm making a wall along this whole side of my outside torso box. If I have an incoming strike coming high towards my outside shoulder, I want to scoop my weapon up and across. All the time I'm trying to make a perpendicular angle to where my opponent is striking. The more perpendicular I am to my opponent's incoming strike, the more firm my block will be. Weapon blocking the inside of my body, my inside hip, I'm going to imagine hammering like a judge pounding a gavel, with my fist pumping down and back to rest directly in front of my waistline or hip socket on my inside, my weapon dominant side, looking something like this. The deeper you pull it back and the more your elbow comes behind you, the firmer your wall will be on the inside of your torso rectangle. On your inside shoulder, think of bringing your hand up and in towards your shoulder, knuckles back, elbow tucked in. This one's tricky because receiving a strike in this range can actually bonk your own weapon into your head. As much as you can try to pull your guard back to block at range away from your body, keeping an opponent's strike away from your arm and torso. The deeper they come in, the more you can actually pull your weapon behind your head to block a strike going to your shoulder. And anywhere in between your inside hip and shoulder keeps your elbow tucked in and merely rotates where your hand positions according to the incoming strike.